Welcome. Today, we're diving into a really profound piece of ancient wisdom. But we're not just looking at it as some old historical text. No, we're treating it as a living, breathing, practical ethical framework. We're going to take just 3 short verses from the Apostle Paul and see how they can become an incredible guide for navigating the real complexities and pressures we all face in modern life.
So here's how we're going to break it down today. We're going to move through this in 4 parts. First, we'll lock in on the foundational command at the very heart of the text. Then, we'll dig into the moral principle behind it and see how it stacks up against a modern ethical dilemma. After that, we'll get super practical with a guide on how to actually do this. And finally, we'll wrap up with a direct personal challenge for you to take with you.
All right, let's start with the verse itself. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. Now, it's so important that we hear this for what it is. This is not a gentle suggestion. It's not some comforting platitude for a greeting card. These are commands. They're being presented as a core instruction manual for how to live a meaningful life, especially when that life gets tough, confusing, or even painful.
And that brings us to our first major idea. To really feel the weight of this verse, we've got to reframe how we see it. This isn't just some nice spiritual advice for when you're in a good mood. It's actually presenting us with a fundamental ethical duty, a responsibility that goes right up against our most basic, hardwired human reactions to the world.
Let's call this what it is, the core ethical duty of unconditional gratitude. And what's so interesting here is how it's defined, as a disciplined, conscious choice. You see, it's the total opposite of our default setting, which is to let our circumstances dictate how we feel, to be grateful only when things are going our way. This duty asks us to build our entire perspective on a much deeper, more stable foundation, one that doesn't get shaken every time life throws us a curveball. Okay, so now let's analyze the moral principle at the heart of this duty, and then we're going to put it to the test with a very real, very challenging modern problem. Because this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Not in theory, but in the real world, where our ethics are actually forged.
And here's the thing. The principle here is radically different from the modern idea of just thinking positive. This framework doesn't ask us to ignore our pain or pretend it doesn't exist. Actually, it's the opposite. It asks us to look right at our difficulty, at our tough reality, and at the same time acknowledge a deeper truth, that God is present and has a purpose, even and especially in the middle of it. It's about holding 2 things in your hands at once, the reality of the pain and the reality of a greater purpose. Now, this idea of acknowledging pain is the complete opposite of something modern psychology calls toxic positivity. And we've all felt this, right? It's that well-meaning but totally unhelpful comment like, oh, just look on the bright side, when you're really struggling. It basically invalidates what you're feeling. Biblical gratitude, on the other hand, is strong enough to make room for both real grief and real gratitude to exist together in the very same moment.
And this brings us to a super important detail in the original text. The command is to give thanks in all circumstances, not for them. That's a huge difference. Look at the 2 columns. On the left, you've got a posture that acknowledges reality. It's honest. On the right, you've got a posture that basically denies the pain. You don't have to be thankful for a terrible diagnosis or the loss of a job. But this ethical duty calls you to find a reason for gratitude in the middle of it. Maybe for the care you're receiving, or for the family you have, or for strength you never knew you had.
So the bottom line is this. Our gratitude has to be anchored to something way more stable than our feelings or our situations, which are changing all the time. I mean, if your thankfulness is based on having a good job or being healthy, it's incredibly fragile. It vanishes the second those things are threatened. This framework demands we anchor our gratitude to the unchanging character of God, which stays the same whether we're on a mountaintop or in the deepest valley.
So let's get real for a minute. Let's imagine the scenario that really tests this principle. A person gets laid off. The fear is real. The uncertainty is overwhelming. Toxic positivity is absolutely useless here. So how does this duty of unconditional gratitude work? Well, it wouldn't mean saying, oh, thank you for firing me. That would be insane. It might, however, look like a quiet, deliberate choice to shift focus. In this moment of fear, I'm thankful that my value isn't tied to my job title. I'm thankful for the skills I have. I'm thankful for the people who support me. I'm thankful that God's provision isn't limited to just this one paycheck. You see, it's a radical, powerful act of reframing the moment on your own terms.
Okay, now here's where this ancient command gets even more fascinating. It lines up perfectly with a pretty surprising neurological reality that science is really just now starting to fully understand. This isn't just a spiritual exercise we do out of obedience, it's a mental one, and it has profound, measurable, physical effects on our brains.
Get this, MRI scans show that when we intentionally practice gratitude, our brains physically change. It actually activates the brain's reward center and releases dopamine and serotonin, the very chemicals linked to happiness and well-being. And over time, it literally rewires our neural pathways. It's like you're carving a new, healthier trail in a dense forest. This practice makes gratitude a more default response and actively pulls energy away from the parts of our brain that produce anxiety and fear. So when the Bible connects Thanksgiving with peace, it's not just poetry, it's describing a neurological fact.
All right, so understanding the principle and even the science behind it is one thing. But actually putting it into practice, especially when we're under pressure, well, that's a whole other story. So let's shift from the what and the why to the how. How do we actually build this discipline into the fabric of our everyday lives?
First things first, we have to make a fundamental mindset shift. Gratitude is not some passive feeling that we just hope washes over us when everything is going great. It is an active discipline. It's a skill we have to cultivate on purpose, day in and day out, kind of like an athlete training their body or a musician practicing an instrument. It takes consistent work, especially, and this is the most important part, on the days we least feel like it.
So here are 5 really practical daily disciplines you can use to build this habit. Number 1, say it. Before your feet even hit the floor in the morning, speak a word of thanks. That sets the tone for your mind for the entire day. 2, write it. Journaling is powerful, but let's take it a step further. Don't just list stuff. Connect what you're thankful for to God's unchanging character, His faithfulness, His provision. That reinforces your anchor. 3, pray it. Try to intentionally shift the balance of your prayers from just being a list of wants to being a deep expression of thanks. 4, think it. When you catch your mind drifting to worry or complaint, deliberately steer your thoughts towards something good, something praiseworthy. And 5, spread it. Make your gratitude go outward. Verbally thank the people in your life. Tell them the specific ways they make a difference.
Okay, so to help you get started with this, let's walk through a few reflective questions. You can write down the answers or just think them over in a quiet moment. These are really designed to help you engage with this ethical duty on a deeply personal level.
Let's start with just being honest. What's your immediate gut reaction to this command? For some of us, it might feel inspiring. For others, it might feel like an impossibly heavy weight. And you know what? There's no right or wrong answer here. Just acknowledging where you're starting from is the most important first step to any real growth.
Next, let's break it down a bit. These 3 commands are all connected, but we often have different natural abilities for each one. You know, maybe praying constantly feels kind of natural to you, but rejoicing when things are hard feels completely foreign. Figuring out which one is your biggest challenge gives you a specific targeted area to focus your practice on.
And finally, let's make this real. Let's make it actionable. This isn't about some vague idea to be more grateful. Real change happens with small, specific actions. So choose one of the 5 practices we just talked about, or one piece of this command, and make a simple, clear commitment for the next 7 days. What's that one small step going to be for you?
So we've explored the command, we've analyzed the principle behind it, and we've walked through a guide for practice. And now it all comes down to a single point, a moral choice that you and only you can make, moment by moment, day by day.
You know, the true test of this entire ethical framework isn't found when life is comfortable and easy. I mean, anyone can be thankful when things are going their way. The real test and the real transformative power of this choice shows up in those moments of trial. It's when gratitude feels completely counterintuitive, illogical, maybe even impossible. That is precisely when the discipline matters most, and that's when the choice to do it has the power to change everything.
And that really brings us to a deep truth. This choice to give thanks, it's not about trying to fake a positive feeling out of thin air. It's a conscious decision to let faith, not your circumstances, have the final word. It's an expression of trust that even when it's dark, there is a purpose and a presence that is worthy of thanks. In that sense, praise isn't just a reaction to feeling good, it becomes the audible language of your inner conviction. It's a declaration of trust in the face of uncertainty.
So the final challenge is this one question, and it's not a hypothetical. This week, you will almost certainly face something frustrating or unfair or difficult. When that moment hits, what will your first disciplined response be? Will you go down the natural, easy path of grievance and complaint, or will you pause, take a breath, and consciously choose the radical transformative act of gratitude? The choice, as always, is yours.